All right, good to have you this morning. Good to have you back. If you were here last night, we appreciate the things that were said. The purpose of this is it's not a gospel meeting. It's not the typical thing that churches do, and unfortunately, a lot of our gospel meetings have turned into somebody really preaching to us as opposed to the community. The purpose of this is not that. The purpose of this is to motivate us and give us some ideas of reaching out in the community. We're supposed to be a people on a mission. I am convinced. I've seen it many times. David's convinced the church can grow, and it can grow in our day and age, just like it did in time past. But for that to happen, there really kind of needs, in some cases, a change of thought and understand. And I think it starts with the people we bring in that obey the gospel. You didn't just become a Christian to sit in the pew. We're to be Christ-like. And so we are to take this message, and we're going to shine in this world, and we're going to try to bring the good news to other people. And all of us working together can accomplish what we were talking about last night. We can spread the good news, and the church will grow to the glory of God. But and so pay attention. There are notepads in the back if you haven't picked up one and you want to take notes, and you can get those. But at this time, I'm going to ask Ace, will you lead us in a word of prayer?
Amen. Good morning. Is this working? This okay. All right. Well, now I went last night without taking a break, and I realized that later because I get going, and I've done a lot of weddings in my lifetime, and I remember one time I was doing a wedding, and I was almost halfway through the entire wedding, and I looked up, and everybody was still standing up. You know, when you ask them to rise when the bride comes in, I forgot to tell them to sit down. So everybody's still standing. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can be seated." So I get going. So today we will take breaks, okay? I'm not going to make you listen to me all day without taking a break. So it's a little after 9, so we'll go to around, we can do 45 minutes or so, 50 minutes. 10 o'clock we'll take a break and let you stretch your legs, go to the restroom, whatever. Just get a break from listening to me. I want to share with you this morning. Well, first of all, there's a lot of positive things here. I can see that already. You guys really do have a good foundation with which to work here. So I want to tell you that up front. There's a lot of positives here I've seen. And thank you for not putting me up in the TP motel. I saw that coming in, and I thought, oh, I hope that's not where I'll stay tonight. Although I'm sure it's a great place, but it's just not what I had in mind. Holiday Inn Express is wonderful. Breakfast was really good. The accommodations are very nice, so thank you for that. But I tallied up the numbers from the survey last night, and I just want to share with you a few of the things that you told me. So I don't know how accurate it is. I don't know anything. So this is based on what you said. Here's the things that you say that you do well, that you scored really high on. Number 7, and this is in the workbook, by the way, if you want to look. I think it's page 24, 24 and 25. If you're in the workbook, you can look. Number 7, you did really good. And when I say good, this means on a scale of 1 to 5, you scored a 3.5 or higher. Okay? These are the things you scored, 3.5 or higher. Are all teachers faithful in attending service? You scored really high there. Number 12, do you have an efficient system for registering visitors? You scored high there. Number 17, are all visitors properly greeted by several members? You scored high there. Number 20, how is your mission work support? You scored high there. Number 26, is there adequate parking? You scored high there. Well-equipped classrooms, number 27 was high. Number 30 was a good score. Regular fellowship opportunities. Number 33 was good. Adequate budget for Bible school materials. Number 35 was scored high. I think this one might be your highest score. Is the preaching informative, motivating, convicting, and Bible-based. There was one survey sheet that I said do 1 to 5, and somebody put 22 there. I think that was Brian's, but that skewed the numbers. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. You really did score high on that one, so that's good. And I heard other people tell me last night that you're very, very happy with Brian's preaching and teaching. Number 36, you scored high on. How is the outside appearance of the building? Number 41, the interior of the building, good repair, clean, and appealing to visitors. You scored high there. And I guess that's it. Here's the ones that you did not score so well. And when I say that, this is your assessment of things that you yourselves think areas that you probably could do better. And these are things that you scored a 2 or less on the average, okay? Number 6, do you have a planned program to recruit new Bible school teachers? So whether you do or not, most of you don't feel that you have is good there. Number 9, does the congregation always have home Bible studies in progress? And by the way, these are all typical. This is the way most congregations would score these. Number 10, do you keep and display adequate tracts in neighborhood businesses? Now that is something that you may not be in complete control of, because some businesses won't let you display tracts. So, but there are some that will, and I would encourage you to look into that. Number 13, do you have a program to visit all visitors? That was a low score. Number 14, do you show appreciation to teachers every year? Was a low score. Number 18, is there, that's a typo. There are weekly visitation programs. Man, I can't believe that's in that. Is that in that book that way? I'm going to have to fire my editor. That's me. No, actually, I actually have 2 people that edit for me, and they both missed that. That's kind of weird. I got to get that corrected. Oh, speaking of, by the way, we this is a side note. As I mentioned last night, I'm president of World Bible Institute. That's really what my job is, my main job. And we establish preacher schools and mission fields and do a lot of other things. But one thing that we are doing this next year is starting WBI Press. We're starting to publish materials, and our first project, our big project, is, are y'all familiar with Apologetics Press? Okay. Well, Apologetics Press has asked us to publish their Bible. They have a Defending the Faith Bible. We are producing it in Spanish for them. And so we have a team. We've been working on it 3 years, and it should be finished, well, this month. It should be finished, and then it'll go to printing. So this summer, it'll come out. And if you buy one of those, in the front, it will say WBI Press. And that's going to be one of the first things that we put on our website to sell. And so we're going to be updating this book on WBI Press, and we are definitely going to be updating this one because there's a typo. So I'm glad I saw that. But anyway, so that's kind of a big deal for us this next year. We're excited about. Number So number 18, weekly visitation program. You scored low there. Number 19 was a low score. Our teachers help to grow by a special program each year. You're probably wondering, what exactly would that be? Well, there are teacher training programs and materials and things of that nature that are very helpful for teachers out there that I would suggest that you consider. Number 21, advertising. Someone mentioned that last night when I asked, what do you do well? What do you could do better? Someone mentioned advertising or marketing. And sure enough, others agreed with you on that. And then number 25, you scored low. Is there an active prospect file? And I will tell you that I hope you understand. I'm not criticizing you in any way. These are your assessments, but there's nothing here out of line. This is typical, and what this shows is that the areas where you need to focus some attention is normal. Is normal. Even a strong, solid group of Christians will find these same areas to be lacking a lot of places. So, but this does help us, and it helps you to see areas where maybe you need to look at maybe putting a little more attention. And so, yes, sir. Oh, yeah, sure. Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah, and I will get to that a little bit, but I can just mention to you first and basic, the most basic fundamental you are already doing, and that is there's a sign coming into town that said, what's it say? Welcome, Church of Christ welcomes you, or something like that. And does it even have your address? Abell Street, I think. Yeah, so that's really good. I mean, you have 3 of those coming in from different directions. That's really good. What I would suggest, in addition to that, and these are the advertising 101 type things. Like that's just basic stuff, but it's still kind of hard to find. Um, so if you know where it is, it's easy, right? So if someone says, can I find, how do I find your church building? You're going to say, oh, it's easy. Well, yeah, it's easy to you, but for someone that's never been here, it's kind of hard to find. I couldn't see you until I got right at the building. I can't see you till I get right in front of it. So nobody is going to accidentally find you. And that's a little bit of a detriment for you. And so I don't know if you can, to your question, I don't know if you can or not, but if the owners of these properties, like off of the main drag up here where you turn on the 3rd Street to come this direction, man, that'd be a really good spot for a sign with an arrow that says Church of Christ. And you may have to pay them if the city will allow it. And you pay those people, say, hey, we'll give you X amount of dollars if you'll let us put a sign there. Tell you that will pay you big dividend. And is there a main road right up here too? I thought I saw a lot of traffic. Is it that way? So maybe there's a place there. So signage would be helpful to you. Also, anything in social media is helpful. And so just a quick response, utilize all of that. Facebook, if you have a MySpace, you probably want to get rid of that. But Facebook is good. But anybody want to know what the number one? Do I? Oh, well, word of mouth. Yeah, you're right. That's the best advertising. But I mean, as far as social media and technology, Google Maps, website. You have to have that. You have to have that. But one of the worst things to destroy the growth of the church can also be a website. Now, what do I mean by that? How could a website be bad? Right. That's the number one. Very good, Sue, right? But very good. You have to keep it up to date. And so, but the website today, did you know they still sell yellow pages? They still sell. People are going around knocking on doors and asking people to buy an ad in the Yellow Pages. And I told my mother, she owned a daycare business, her and my dad, for a while. And they bought an ad in the Yellow Pages. I said, Mom, don't do that. That's a waste of money. People don't use Yellow Pages anymore. Everybody, and I mean everybody, uses this, right? I mean, we use this for everything. When I stopped for lunch on the way out here yesterday, they gave me my ticket and it had a QR code. So you can pay with your phone. I said, I'd rather not. But I know you can do anything with this. Well, this is where everybody's going to find you, is on the website. They'll put in Abell Street Church of Christ or Church of Christ in Wharton, and your website should pop up. And when it does, don't have typos in it. Oh, that just drives, I can't believe that. I can't believe that's there. You know, this is probably 12 years old. And it's, oh my word, that's embarrassing. And that's one of the things I harp on. If you produce a church bulletin or anything that you produce that says Church of Christ on it, it needs to be top notch. I mean, top notch. It is a disgrace, and it's embarrassing when I get a bulletin from some church in the mail and the print is crooked on the paper, or the ink is not, I'm like, really? In this day and age, we should do better than that. We just need to take more pride in those kind of things. But a website is key. So, and all of social media, but you need to take advantage of that. But you're right, Shauna, probably the best advertisement there is word of mouth. So, but I would suggest that you have one person for sure that's his area of expertise, if you will. And maybe he's not an expert, but he needs to become one. You take care of all of our marketing and advertising. And I'm telling you, that is a huge part of growing a church. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. When you have a gospel meeting, or you have a Bible school goal day, or you have bring a friend day, or you have a marriage seminar, whatever, you market it, you promote it, you advertise, and you get people in here. That's what you do. And that's how you grow a church. Marketing is so important. So when you say in here, advertising, you scored low, good for you to recognize that. I appreciate your honesty in recognizing, hey, I think we can do better there. So, and I can tell you, your elders appreciate that too. They want to know what you're thinking and where your mind is, and they want to know, how can we do better here? Obviously, that's why we're having the seminar, right? So, so you did score high on a lot of things, scored low on a lot of things too. So I am going to leave this with you guys. I'll leave it with Brian. He can make copies for the elders, and y'all can see this, and that'll help you to kind of focus on things that you need to do. Anyway, any questions or comments about that? Oh, I will say one thing before I don't mean to interrupt you. There was one question here that I wanted to bring up, because the scores were really varied. And it was this, number 47, are there programs for the ladies and the men? Almost everybody put a certain score there, but they all pointed to the ladies. And the indication was there were things for ladies, but not so many things for the men. Is that accurate? Yeah? Okay. I wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. So, so that's something that we need to look at too, that I think is very important that you may be missing out on, is doing things for the men. Because who are the leaders in the church? Men or the women? The men, right? Is it because men are better at it than women? Nope. That's not the reason. It's not the reason. Yeah. Hey, I tell you, and it's not even speakers. There are some women that are excellent speakers too. So it's not about who's better at it. God has a reason for putting us in the roles that we are in. And so we need to respect what God's plan is, even if we do or don't agree or understand. God knows what He's doing, and He put men in that position for a reason. And there are some biblical things there. We don't have time, and I'm not going to get into that. But my point is, we don't need to neglect the men. We need to develop our men to become leaders. And that's what pet peeve. I'm fixing to get on the soapbox here, so I'll make this quick. This is one of my complaints about how we're operating in the Church of Christ. We have several preacher training schools, which is really good. How many schools do we have for elders? We don't. And we need to train men to be elders. That's where I think, last night I talked about the importance of leadership. That's part of the problem of why we're losing churches and why we're not growing, is because we have good men that are elders, but they really aren't qualified. They don't know their Bible. They don't develop their leadership skills. And we just don't help them enough. We need to help our men to develop to be better leaders. And so I have actually conducted in a couple of congregations shepherding school. It's just one weekend, Friday night and all day Saturday. It's just for elders. And we did it at Northwest, where Robert is. We did a shepherding school there. And all the speakers on the program were elders, except for a couple, me and another, Steve Miner. Do you know Steve Miner? He's a preacher out at Wiley, east of Dallas. Steve and I were on the program. We weren't elders, but everybody else was elders. And we had 75 elders that showed up for that from different congregations, all in the Fort Worth and Dallas area. And you know what they said? This is awesome. We need this so bad. And it was really good. But we've got to do better in helping our men to develop. So I noticed that was one area that you mentioned. There's more focus on doing things for the ladies than the men. And so you might want to think about that. And we can talk about that later if y'all want to. So questions or comments about this? Yes, ma'am. That's right. It is. You're right. We need to start when they're young, training these young men and continue their whole life in their training and growing. Young men's training class is really good. Uh, some churches call it Timothy class. Have y'all heard of that? Timothy class. I think those are really, really good tools to help develop young men to become elders. And then on top of that, when they do become adult men, there needs to be additional training and help to develop them, even after they become elders. That's what I was talking about last night for Temple and Brother Ace and the other elders here and deacons and the preacher. You need to constantly be growing, studying, reading, learning, and I tell you, it comes easier in time. It'll come easier for you. But Shauna, you had a comment, question? No, but that would be really good. I think that would be good. And I think there needs to be preachers' wives too, because that is a very unique situation. Um, I was talking to Ace last night and Temple how that most people in the church have no idea what it means to be an elder and what these elders deal with privately with members. There are tears shed, a lot of praying, a lot of pressure. It's being an elder is not for the weak or unstable. Being an elder, well, that's what it means. Not a novice. It's a man that's mature in the faith. Well, guess what? Being an elder's wife is about the same thing. Now, they're a team. They're a team. And there's a lot of things that, sometimes the elder can't share with his wife, and that's understandable. And she will respect that. However, when my wife, I worked with a congregation one time that had 20 people when we got there. And the first business meeting, I came home. My wife said, "Well, how did it go?" And I said, "Well, all I got out of that meeting is that top hog is going for 32 cents a pound." And she said, "What's top hog?" And I said, "I don't know, but it's going for 32 cents a pound." She said, "That's what you got out of the business meeting?" I said, "I just stayed quiet. I'm learning how things work here." And but after that, it was business meetings were a headache. I mean, these guys just had so far to go, And it's literally, when I would come home from a business meeting, she would meet me at the door with a glass of water and 2 Tylenol. That's not a joke. I come home with a headache after dealing with these guys. So, and those were minor things. But what Sean is asking is so important. As a wife, she has to be supportive of her husband. And, sometimes she just needs to hug him and say, "Hey, I know it's hard, and I'm here for you." And sometimes she needs to talk with somebody, you know, and I don't mean for her own personal good, which is also there, but sometimes the elder will bring his wife in to talk with a couple, counsel or whatever. They are a team, and they have to be. They have to work together. But there's a lot of pressure being an elder's wife and being a preacher's wife. And I told my wife, I was a preacher before I got married, and I told Rhonda, I said, "Are you sure you know what you're getting into here?" Because there are some people that think that we should drive a certain kind of car, we should wear certain kind of clothes. And if you're getting your nails done, there's some that'll criticize that. He said, "Really?" I said, "Oh, yeah. You live in a glass house, and people can be critical." However, I can tell you, church has always been really good to us. But there's always somebody that's got some critique, the preacher or the elders. And so you have to have thick skin to serve in those leadership roles. But elders' wives don't always have somebody to talk to either. And some things they can't share, and they just have to bear a burden. And so I think it would be good to include something like that. And I think that's really good for ladies' days, where they can discuss those things and share, the struggles with being a leader's wife. But anyway, we just don't give enough attention to that leadership thing. But that's a really good observation. Anybody else? Okay, let's get started on the planning thing. And I'm gonna run through this kind of quick, because everything that I discuss, almost everything that I discuss today, is in the book. But I'm going to kind of explain some of the stuff in greater detail for you. And then there's some details here that I won't be discussing, that I think are self-explanatory. But you have to have a plan. And this is where I think a lot of congregations are struggling, and why they're not growing. They really don't have a plan. And I talk to preachers about planned preaching. And I've had preachers tell me, "Oh, yeah, I'm really into planned preaching." Well, what they mean by that is, I've got all of my sermons predetermined for a full year. I've already got, so if you look at March 17th of next year, I can tell you what sermon I will preach. Well, that's not what I mean by plan. That's really, I don't personally think that's a good approach, because you need to preach what the church needs, and what you don't know what they're going to need in March of next year yet. And so planned preaching is determining a direction you want to go. And we'll talk about that a little later. But But planning is something most churches just simply don't do, other than maybe the budget. They'll look at the budget and say, this is what we're going to do next year. But as far as activities and things you're going to do, very little planning. And so there needs to be a plan. If you don't have a plan, you see what that says, a church without a plan is like a boat without a rudder. A lot of chaos and just kind of going wherever the wind blows you. It's really good to have a plan. Turn this on. Works better when it's on. Strategic planning. And so what I'm talking about here is you have a goal in mind. You have things that you want to accomplish. And so you have to plan with strategy. You know, it's like, okay, here's where we're going. So this is the plan to accomplish that and to reach those goals. And this is key. Trying to change people's behavior without changing the thinking is a waste of time. Proverbs 23 and verse 7. Does anybody know what that says? I'll get you started, see if y'all can finish it. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. That's right. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. And so here's where, forgive me for this, but where the rubber meets the road. If you want to grow a church, you have to change the way the people think. And let me explain what I mean by that. We need to change the culture in this church. What we want is for this church, and by you understand what I mean, this church, these people, this congregation, to have a different thought process about being a Christian. What would the ideal situation is that when Steve goes to the grocery store, he doesn't see a sack boy. He sees a soul. When you go to a restaurant to eat, you don't see a waitress. You see a soul that's outside of Christ. See where I'm going? You got to start thinking differently. When a visitor walks through that door, you don't see a visitor, you see a soul that needs to be reached. And so you got to change the way you think, and that will change the way you act. And this is biblical. Romans 12 and verse 2 says, be not conformed to this world. Anybody know what the rest of it is? But be transformed, how? By the renewing of your mind. That is so key to this. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We have to change the way we think. Philippians 4, do I have that up there? No, I don't have that up there. Philippians 2:5 says, let this mind be in you, which was the mind of Christ. Have the mind of Christ. So there's a lot of scriptures about your mind. Philippians 4 and verse 7 talks about the peace of God that passes all understanding, you know. And then verse 8, so think on these things that, things that are true, things that are, what's the second one? Noble, things that are just, things that are pure, things that are lovely, of good report. If there's any virtue, or if there's anything of praiseworthy, what does it say to do with those? Starts with an M. Meditate on these things. You see that idea? What's in your head? Think. So Brian and Ace and Temple, you guys, what you want to do with this congregation, you got to change the way these people think. Change the way these people think. We don't just come here to worship God and hug each other's neck and encourage each other, and then say, let's go out to where we're going to eat now. You know, that's all good. Nothing wrong with that. But there's so much more to this than that. There's more to this than that. This is not a social club. This is serious business, what we're doing. And we've got to start thinking more about those people out there. And I know it's easy to dismiss that because, you know, you've tried and it didn't work or nobody's interested. You've heard all that, you know, and it's real easy to get to thinking that way. You got to change the way you think. You got to change the way you think. And the way to do that is preaching and teaching. That's the most influential way to change the way people think. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that process, but it's, you know, well, I put up there, repentance means to change one's thinking. It's a change of heart, change of mind. Okay, yeah, I was hoping this was next. Now, one time, I guess the first time I spoke at Polishing the Pulpit, I spent almost my entire lecture on this slide and this idea. I spoke 4 or 5 times on church growth, and the first one was this one, was the turnaround process. Now, usually when I do a church growth seminar, it's a church that's spiraling downward, and they're really hurting, you know, and they're scared they're going to lose the building, they're going to close the door, or even churches that I would go to. That's what I was drawn to, were churches that are struggling, and how I could save that church, basically, and get it turned around. You remember the picture I showed you last night, the roller coaster? Well, and you remember the sigmoid curve? That's the same concept. You know, the church peaks at a certain point and then it starts to decline. Well, that's normal. You can't just stay riding high all the time. It's up and down. But if you don't do something to change that decline and you let it just keep going down, it's going to pick up speed and it's going to go faster and faster. And before you know it, you got a mass exodus on your hands. That's how a church died. That's how it died. So you have to do something to stop that bleeding, or to plug the holes in the bucket, so to speak, and get that turned around going back up. This is that turnaround process, what I mean here, the turnaround process. And I'm not suggesting that's where you are. I don't really know where you are on that S-curve, but I think you're pretty stable right now. But you've got to get it turned to going up. And so this is the process that I teach preachers primarily, because I said that the most influential aspect of changing the way people think is through preaching and teaching. And so there's a 6-stage process, and this is in chapter 6, I think, in the book, a 6-stage process to turning things around. And it has to do with the minds of the people. That's where it happens, is in their minds. You have to get them thinking differently. So the first stage, now, and let me say this. Number 6 is how they view the world. This is, you see, it's how they view. So that's what I'm talking about, their mind, the people, members of the church. The last stage, how they view the world, that's actually where you go out and evangelize. That's where you evangelize. But you know, where most of the time where we like to start in turning a church around is number 6. You know, that's just normal, I guess. Well, we just need to get out there and we need to reach the lost. Not yet. My suggestion is we need to do some other things first. You got to get your house in order before you start bringing people in here. You can't have company. What do? You clean. That mantle and those pictures, that all that dust that's on there, it's been there for 3, 4, 5 weeks. You clean all that up, don't you? You clean that off. And then when people come to your house, they say, oh, your house is so clean, so beautiful. Oh, thank you. Like you always have it that way, you know, but you clean house. Well, it's the same thing with the church. And I don't mean just physically. I mean, as a body, as a family, you need to get your act together before you bring people in here. See where I'm going with that? So we don't start with number 6 of evangelism. We got some other things we need to do before that. And the first thing, and this is why the timing is perfect. The timing is perfect with the Hodges just coming here. They're new here. This is an exciting time. It's a new year starting next month. this is a perfect time to get a fresh start, a do-over. So timing could not be better. So point number one, the way to turn a church around and get it going back up is how the church views the preacher. So it's really important, and most of this is for Brian, I apologize, and the elders too, but all of you are affected by this. It's really important that you trust that guy. Obviously you do. I've heard, by the way, I've heard a lot of positive things about the Hodges already from you guys, so that's good. But Brian is in the stage, what do we call the first couple of years? That's right. You see how quick the honeymoon stage, that's right. That's what preachers call that when we're new at a church. We're in the honeymoon stage. Everybody likes us. Here you get to know us a little better, and then you start seeing our flaws. You say, well, Hamrick, he's not all that good after all, and not that great after all. And we get used to each other, and the honeymoon's over at some point. But during that honeymoon stage is when he and his wife, I forgot your name. Melinda. Okay. When Brian and Melinda are forming relationships with you guys, they're new. They're on the outside looking in. They're trying to work their way in to being a part of this church family. And your job is to welcome them and make them feel welcome and work beside them and encourage them and lift them up. So there's a process going on right now. You're in that stage where you're developing those relationships. And what Brian needs to do, step one of this process, is to develop trust. That you trust him when he gets up in that pulpit, he's not going to teach something that's not right. He's not going to teach any error. He's going to only teach truth. All the sermons, and that was one of the things you scored the highest on, was the preaching and teaching, which is good. But how can a preacher develop good relationships with individual members? What's something he can do? Yes, ma'am. Rice Krispie cookies. So two things. He visited people, went in their homes, and he brought a treat. That's always welcome. I mentioned that in the book that door knocking is not what it used to be. So if somebody knocks on your door, they better have a pizza in their hand, right? I mean, because otherwise you're not welcoming them. It's like when our doorbell rings, well, let me ask you. You're sitting at home, your family, you're sitting on the couch watching TV and the doorbell rings. What do? What's your first response? That's right. Who is that? I look at my wife and say, are you expecting somebody? She said, no. And we go into panic mode. My socks are on the floor. Took my shoes off right there with socks on, and I don't know who it is. It's not like it used to be. I think it's different, but visitation, that's really good. Did you hear that, Brian? You said that was really good that preacher visited people. And so, okay, that's something he can do. What else can a preacher do to help develop a good relationship? Be involved in the community. That's right. When I was a preacher at one little town, smaller than this one, I would go to the ball games, and especially if we had kids that were in sports from the church. We had a few, but get involved in the community and go to the ball games. You meet parents, you root for their kids. You're sitting there, and the kid fumbles the ball. You don't say, oh, man, why do they keep giving him the ball? That guy's not even, and his mama's sitting right next to you. You don't do that, right? Instead, you're like, boy, that guy's great. Boy, what a catch. Was that? And they say, that's my boy. Well, there's your open door. Really? What's his name? He's great. He's great. How long's he been playing? Da 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 da. Next thing you know, you're having a conversation. You made a friend. And where do y'all go to church? That's how it works. Yeah, community involvement. And so I got to become the chaplain of the football team. Well, it was great. I'd go in with the guys before every game and have a very short devotional thought and have prayer with them. The baseball tournaments, I sang the national anthem. Graduation, baccalaureate, I preached baccalaureate service. I preached in the Baptist church. I preached in the Methodist church. Some of my brethren didn't appreciate that. I don't care. We were baptizing people. We were reaching lost people. So, good point. Carlos, is that right? Good point. Yes, community. Get involved in the community is really, really a good tool. What else can the preacher do to connect with the members here? Know their names. That's good, Sheila. No, yeah, Mary. Know their names. Now that's a hard one. That's a hard. Yeah, that's hard. Maybe Brian has a tool he might use or something, but that's one of my weaknesses. I'm not very good with names, and so. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's an area that's an area where that needs to be addressed. Because you need to work on that unity. And um, so, do y'all have a picture directory, church directory? Okay, good. Well, that really is helpful, right? Yeah, right. And it's hard for them, the extroverts, introverts, and they don't do well in crowds. But that's real important for the preacher and his wife to get to make relationships is know people's names, and so that's helpful. What else? Mhm. Make connections. Hmm. So how do you do that? That's you're right. So how do you? Hmm. Right. That's good. Yeah, you have to. What Brian is doing in 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 engaging with people is is enabling a conduit, if you will, um, to preach to you things that you don't necessarily want to hear. Um, if if Temple knows that Brian loves him, then if Brian preaches on something that is a soft spot for Temple, he's going to receive it a lot better. Instead of saying, "Preacher, you're meddling today." Instead, he'll say, "You know what, Brian? I needed that sermon." You see the difference? And the difference is their relationship. And so, a way, and I appreciate your point, engaging with people is important. you develop these relationships when somebody's child or grandchild is in the one-act play, go to it. Or if they're playing in a sport, go to the game and show interest in their kids. I'm talking to you, Brian, I guess. But this helps, and you know all this stuff already. But that's really important. And when somebody's sick, you just go. You be there for them. Yes, sir? Yeah, be involved in the person. Sir? Right. Yeah. So, what is that statement? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. That really is true. That really is true. And so a preacher is working on building that relationship with the members to build trust and a connection so that when he finds out that one of the deacons has a wine cellar in his house and he preaches on the sin of alcoholism, it'll be a little better received. You see where I'm going with that. I'm not suggesting, Steve, that you have a wine cellar, by the way, but you know my point. You get my point. We all have sin. We all do. We all mess up. And so if our preacher, we know he loves us and he preaches on something that steps on my toes, my response should be, thank you, brother. I appreciate you pointing that out. That helped me. That's an area that I can improve on, or that's something I'm struggling with or whatever. But that's important. So that's the first stage of the turnaround process is how they view the preacher. Secondly, and I would say elders fit in that same category. If you're going to lead people, if you want them to follow, you have to be engaged in their lives and that kind of thing too. So number two, how they view God. And now this is, and this is something Brian and I are going to meet about this afternoon, is sermons. And this is what I was saying about planned preaching. There's sermons that back up every one of these stages. So in order for you to really trust Brian, then he needs to preach things, sermons that indicate to you he's not going to promote anything that's not in the Bible. You see where I'm saying? That from his preaching that he's going to stick with God's word. Second stage is how the church views God. That's important. How the church views God. So what do we need to know about God? We need to know that God can grow this church. That's what I was talking about last night. Do you have faith that God can grow this church? Yes. You have faith that God wants to grow this church? Yes. Do you have faith that God will grow the church? Yeah, you should. But it's about God, and that's where sermons will be preached about what God can do and increase your faith in God and the power that God has to grow this church and the desire that God has to grow this church. And so sermons preached on that. So he's going to preach sermons that increase your connection with him. Secondly, he's going to be preaching sermons about God and increasing your faith in God, that God can grow this church. Third stage, and these are sermons that are kind of sprinkled in amongst others. It's not every Sunday, but he'll preach in, say, a couple of months. He may preach 3 or 4 sermons about God and what he can do, something like that. The third stage is how they view themselves. So how you, as a congregation, view Abell Street Church of Christ. Now, when I would go to a struggling church, here's what I would hear from the members. Oh, Brother Hamrick, we're so glad you came. Man, we couldn't get him. Nobody wanted to be our preacher. We don't have any young. We're just all old people here. We don't have any money. Our finances are struggling, and we don't have any elders, and and we don't have, we can't, on and on. They have just beat themselves down to where they have a low self-esteem as a church. And maybe rightfully so. Maybe it's accurate. But let me explain this, and then we're going to take a break. So here's where you want to change that thinking. I noticed y'all have a Buc-ee's. Is that new? Few years? That's pretty good. I mean, Buc-ee's, that's a big deal, right? And the Hampton Inn, that's new, isn't it? I think they're still building that. And Holiday Inn, that's a pretty nice place. I mean, Wharton actually has a lot to offer. I was impressed by that. There's really a lot here. However, the most valuable, important institution, organization in Wharton is not Buc-ee's. I want you to think about this. The most valuable organization in all of Wharton is the Church of Christ. This is it. Abell Street and MLK. That's the most valuable organization in this whole city, by far. What does Jesus say? What does it profit a man if he gain the whole world, lose his soul? You know what that means? That means if Beverly was the only person on this planet, God would still sacrifice his son for her. Her soul is worth more than everything this world has to offer. Your soul is worth more than this whole world. So we got to get past that thinking that, poor us and that kind of thing. No. Man, this is the most valuable institution on the planet. This church, Abell Street Church of Christ and MLK, I think that's the only two congregations here, right? Church of Christ, are the most, that's it. And so you need to understand how important this is, what we're talking about here. We're not playing chess or checkers. This is really important, what we're doing here. And you are a key to accomplishing what God wants to do in Wharton, Texas. It's you, nobody else. And so, sermons on Luke chapter 15. There's 3 parables in Luke chapter 15. The first one is the lost sheep. What's the second one? Lost coin. The third one, the lost boy. Those 3 parables really zero in on the value and importance of one person, one soul. And for starters, that's you. That's you. You need to understand how valuable you are to God and how valuable we are together as his family here in Wharton. And so sermons need to be preached at this stage to help change the way this church thinks, to where you stop saying about the Church of Christ at Abell Street, well, you hear members, you ever hear your members say, yeah, well, the Church of Christ at Abell Street, they're doing such and such. And they're members here, and they're saying they. You got to change that to where they're saying we. Different attitude, different mentality. Okay, I've gone overboard. Let's take about a 5-10 minute break, and then let's start back at 10:15. Okay? Thank you. They're coming? Okay. Well, it's so nice outside, isn't it? I see the sun shining out there. Yeah. Oh, is it? Well, it is December. You know, it's supposed to be cooler, but uh, yes, sir, just south of Fort Worth. Um, well, I hope so. I really like the cool weather. I don't like it. I don't like ice and all that, but I like the change of temperature. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Instead of TV. Well, I'm sure you were pleasantly surprised, right? Oh, that's great. Well, I was very happy with the accommodations y'all made for me because I wasn't looking forward to TP motel either. But right. Well, I still don't want to sleep there. Uh, it's kind of like I live in Grandview. I live in Grandview, which is a little bitty one red light town. We moved there on purpose because I wanted the slower lifestyle and everything. And in the square, not square, but that at the red light in downtown, they have bricks. It's a brick road, and it's terrible. There's holes everywhere. The bricks, it's caving in, but nobody wants to fix it because it's a landmark. Those bricks, you can't take those out. We're like, fix the road, but no, you can't. Those are bricks are special. So anyway, whatever. But I get it. So okay, all right. So how they view themselves is what we're talking about, how the members view themselves. It's real important to change the way people think. And we're going to talk about some of those things a little bit later. I know I keep saying that. I've got a lot to discuss. So I will zip through some of these slides. But number 4, this is just the progression that I want to see the congregation go through this progression. Number 4, how they view the Bible. And here's where sermons and Bible school classes will emphasize that this is not just a book. This is God's word. It's not a book of suggestion. It's literally called law, God's law. James chapter 1 and verse 25 speaks of it as um, the law of liberty. So it's law. What God says is what we do. We don't do anything that's not authorized by this book. It has authority, and we don't go beyond that which is written. Because here's the thing: if you have a faulty view of the Bible's inspiration, or a faulty view of the Bible's authority, then everything else you learn after that is not going to be what it should be. That's kind of like a fundamental springboard to learning the Bible. You got to first of all understand this is inspired of God. This is God's word. It is our guide. We don't do anything that's not authorized by this. We don't add to it. We don't take away from it. It's sacred. It's holy. Paul said to Timothy in, what was it, 2 Timothy, is it 1 Timothy 3:15, along in there, that from a child you have known the Holy Scriptures. The Holy Scriptures. You remember when Moses approached God at the burning bush, when God was speaking to him from the burning bush? I would have gone there too, wouldn't you? You see a bush burning and it's not being consumed by the fire. I got to take a look at that. That's what Moses did. He walks up there to it. What's the first thing God told him to do? Take your shoes off. Why? You're standing on holy ground. Moses, you take your shoes off. You realize what we're doing here? You realize who I am? You take your shoes off. What does that mean? Take your shoes off. Why? What does that express? Respect, humility. What's that? Submission, honor, all of those things. Well, let me tell you something. This is from God. And when we open this book, we should treat it as if it came straight down from heaven, from the hand of God Himself. And when we open this book, we should take off our shoes. You understand what I mean by that? I don't mean literally, but you understand what I mean? Because this is not just another book. So there will be sermons preached and Bible classes taught on this book. Why we should trust this book. That it's from God. That we need to respect it. It's inspired of God. Everything we do has to be authorized by this. We don't add anything to it. Those kind of lessons are there to help you to respect this as our guide. Because the truth of the matter is, I don't care if we get 250 people in here. If we're not teaching what this says, it's a waste of time. We have to do what this says. And I appreciate James chapter 1. I just thought about what that says about the perfect law of liberty. He says, verse 25, but he who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues in it, and is not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this one will be blessed in what he does. There it is again. If God's telling us, look, if you'll just do what I say, you'll be blessed. You'll be blessed. And so you're helping them establish, you're helping the members to understand in their minds a healthy respect for the Word of God. So there won't be any suggestions that, why don't we let the women lead in the communion? Why don't we let Shauna lead the opening prayer? She's good. Why don't we do that? There won't be any of that if they understand we're going by what the Bible says. We're not going to have a Church of Christ garage sale for mission work. What's wrong with that? What does the Bible say that we're to fund the work of the church? Giving. When? First day of the week. 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 2. This says, on the first day of the week. So we don't take a collection up on Tuesday. Now I know with online giving and all that gets a little bit crazy, right? But the point is, the first day of the week is special to God. And that's when He says we're to gather as a family and worship Him and give as we have prospered on the first day of the week. That's how it's done. Now, if you want to have a garage sale and take every bit of the money you made off your garage sale and Sunday morning put that in the plate, that's great. And you might say, well, you're getting nitpicky there. Well, He's picky. Ask Nadab and Abihu if He's not. Ask Uzzah if he's not. Y'all know who Uzzah is? The guy that reached up to staple the, God says, look, this is what I said. Remember Saul in the Old Testament? Well, God said, I want you to kill them all, the animals, everything. Saul didn't do it. He said, well, I kept some of these animals to offer sacrifice. No. What does God require more than sacrifice? Obedience. Do what I say, and I'll bless you. You don't do what I say, you disobey me, what will God do? Punish you. That message is over and over in the Old Testament. Man, if you don't get that, you're not looking. And so we have to have a healthy respect for this. And if the members of the church, if this congregation all understand this is our God, we're going to do what this says, and He'll bless us. We're not even going to consider doing things that are against or contrary to what God said. That needs to be drilled into everybody's head. We all need to understand that and have a healthy respect for it. And then when you have that, you're going to have very little or maybe nobody, very few people saying, yeah, but I like, well, that church they have guitars and drums and man, look at all the people over there. Well, why don't we do that? We're still singing. That's what the Bible says to sing. Yeah. But it doesn't say to add the instrument. And that's a whole nother thing. But you see where I'm going with all this? We have to do things the way the Bible says. And so at this stage, we're helping the congregation as a whole to understand, have a healthy respect for God's Word as our guide and God's Word only. Now, the next stage is sin. So you see, we don't start off preaching against sin right away. And I'm not saying you can't preach against sin early on, but for a new preacher, and it's mostly young guys that are just getting started, they're fresh out of school. They come in and they see what's wrong in a congregation, and man, they start hammering that. No, that's not where you start. You don't start there. You don't start at number 6, and you don't start at number 5. Because if I'm a new preacher and I come into this church and I know that Brian, let's say Brian's daughter goes to the swimming pool and she's wearing a bikini, and I hear about that. So I'm going to get up and I'm going to preach on modesty. And I'm going to hammer that home, and I'm going to say, and some of our kids right here in this church have been seen. How is Brian going to accept that? How is he going to respond? Well, I know how he would. But typically, it'd be like, wow, we need to go somewhere else. I mean, that's kind of how I would feel. But the truth of the matter is, that girl doesn't need to be dressed like that in public. We all know that would not be right. But that's not the way to handle that. That's not the way to handle that. So you don't start there. And it's like when an incident happens like that, and the reason I chose Brian, because I know that's not accurate, but when something like that happens, if somebody's kid is involved in something and it's kind of well known that what's going on, that's not the time to preach on that either. Don't preach on that. Not right now. Not now. You have to be careful how you deal with things, how you handle situation. So speak the truth in love, right? Anyway, okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you see where I'm going. But this is where now we can talk about sin, because you know that Brian loves you. So when he preaches on a sin that's a little close to home, you're going to receive it a little better than you would before. And so that's why the addressing sin is a little bit farther down the list. And I hope you understand where I'm going with this. It's just the way you approach things. Yes, ma'am. Right. Yeah, that's exactly right, Melinda. And you know, I was going to address this later, but I'll just mention it now because it's on my mind. I was speaking at a church one time, and I was a little bigger than I am now. And this little girl, I was talking to a family after church, good people, and they had a little girl. She's about 4, I think, and she was standing right there in front of me, and we're talking. And she's just staring right at my belly, and all of a sudden, she reaches up with her finger and she pokes my belly. She says, "You're fat." And and her mother was mortified. And I said, you know what? You're right. I could stand to lose a few pounds. Well, uh, okay, so if I mean, maybe it's true. Maybe it's true. But you don't walk up. I mean, she's a baby. She didn't know. But okay, so if I come up to somebody, one of you, and I say, you know, you're kind of fat. Is that true? Well, yeah. Is it okay to say it? Well, not that way. We're supposed to speak truth, right? But how you say it, you know, so how could I approach, let's say Ace was way overweight and I want to help him. And so here's how I would approach that. I would say, I'll say, man, I have gained so much weight. I'm trying to lose a few pounds, but I have discovered the older I get, the harder it is to lose weight. And Ace said, yeah, I know what you mean. And I said, well, don't you hate these people that eat pie and ice cream and they're skinny all the time? I don't know how that is, but their metabolism, you know, you're having that conversation. And Ace says, you know, I've had a problem with my weight all my life. And so now he's telling me he's fat. See, I'm not saying it, he is. And we talk about it, and I said, well, you know what I've done? I've lost some weight, and here's how I did it. You see the difference in that? Instead of me saying, you're fat, it's a way that you say things. And the reason what I'm pointing out is, if you want to grow this church, here's a truth. Can you go to any church you want to and go to heaven? No, you can't. You can't. Because the Bible teaches when you become a Christian, what church do you join? There's a trick question. You don't join, right? He adds you to his church. It's not a choice. God adds you to his church. So, having said that, so I'm the preacher here, and I get up in the pulpit, and I'm preaching on the Bible says there's one church. It does. It makes it very clear. The church that Jesus established. There's a bunch of churches out there that were started by men. We know that. Now, if I get up in the pulpit and I say, now, if you're in the Catholic Church, people in the Catholic Church, they're going to hell. They're going to hell. You got to be in the Church of Christ if you want to go to heaven. If you're in the Lutheran Church, you're going to hell. You need to be in the Church of Christ. I'm not arguing whether that's a true statement or not. But my point is, if I'm saying that, you think Jay is going to bring her Catholic friend to worship here? No way. Why? Because they will never come back. You'll run them off so fast, they will never come back. And you know what else? Not only will Jay not bring her Catholic friends, Shauna's not going to bring her Baptist friend. She's not going to invite them to come here for fear of what they're going to hear. You see where I'm going? So yes, we have to preach on sin, but we have to really be careful how we do that. And so, I know a lot of preachers do that. I don't. And I'm not saying I call names in the pulpit from time to time, but not like that. My job, to be honest with you, it's not my job to say, you're going to heaven. Oh, you're not. You are. You're going to hell. That's not my job. My job is to say, this is what this says. And if you do that, you'll be saved. That's my job. Okay? Because and I'm getting off again, but I know people that are members of the Lord's church that worship in a denomination because there's not a Church of Christ 100 miles from where they live. Honestly, they come to Texas from Minnesota or Michigan or somewhere like that. They come down here for the summer. They learn the truth. They become a Christian. They go back home. There's not a Church of Christ within driving distance. And so they start worshiping at a denomination. I don't encourage that, but I understand. Or are they going to go to hell? That's not my job. I'm going to let God deal with that. Do you see that? And I think there are people in denominations that have obeyed the gospel as the Bible describes, and yet they find themselves in the denomination for some reason. I'm not sure how God's going to deal with all that. I don't know. And I don't want to try to guess. That's not my job. I'm going to let God, He knows way better than I do. And so I don't like those questions. I call them trick questions. I've been asked that, from elders. Do you think there's Christians in denomination? And if I say yes, they're going to write me up, I guarantee you. So I have to explain. I said, well, I think if a person obeys the gospel, they're a Christian. I don't care where they're worshiping or not worshiping at all. They become a Christian. So, and what happens from that point on is between them and God, and I'm going to let Him deal with whatever their situations are. I've baptized a guy this year that as soon as he came out of the water, he said a cuss word. I've been preaching 46 years. I never had that happen before. He said a cuss word. And the reason he's from, yeah, I had to baptize him again. I preached 4 times. No, what he was upset about was he's from New York. He's just moved to Texas from New York. And he wanted his baptism to be private. I understood. That's fine. Well, he asked if this one brother in Christ that was there that he kind of connected with, he said, I'd like for him to come and witness my baptism. I said, okay. Well, Kevin, the guy that he asked, told his wife told others, and there were several that showed up. And there were this guy's name is Joe. It was his granddaughters that came and his daughter. They called the family. And so I don't know how they got it together so quick, but it was Sunday afternoon. And so Joe and I are back there putting on our baptismal garments. I'm putting the waders on. We come out there and he sees everybody. And he's upset. He didn't want that. And so he looked at me as he's stepping in the baptistry. He said, did you do this? I said, no, sir. I didn't know they were all going to be here, but that's okay. Okay. So I baptize him. I hug him and say, welcome to the family, brother. And he says, well, they invited the whole blank family, And I thought, well, that's a first. That's a first. But he's a brand new Christian. He doesn't even realize that that's wrong. I'm not surprised if somebody becomes a Christian and they call their friends and get drunk that night to celebrate. What does God do with that? You see where I'm going? I mean, I leave those things to God to deal with. So it's not my job to label who's going to be. But I do know this. There's one church, and that's where the saved are. And Matthew 7 verse 21 says, not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. But what's the rest of it? But he that doeth the will of my Father. That's who's going to be saved, those that do God's will. So that's the truth of the matter. But so we just have to be careful how we teach that. And when I'm teaching someone the gospel, I write those denominations down. And I show them, here's the church that Jesus established. Here's the Reformation movement. And here's where all these churches came from. They're not the Lord's church. They're man-made institutions. You want to try to get to heaven from that? I don't. I'm going to be in the Lord's church. So I point that out. But you have to be careful how you do all of that. So then number 6, now we're ready to reach out. We've taken care of sin in the camp. We've addressed the sins that we're dealing with in this church, and hopefully people have repented of their sins. We've got that taken care of, and I don't know what that looks like. So every church is different. But now we've kind of got our house in order. Let's start reaching out and bringing people in here. And so that's kind of the process that we go through in turning things around. This is about a 12-month process, generally speaking. 12 months. So without exception, every congregation I've ever worked with, because I go through this process, there's almost no growth the first year. A little bit of growth, just because there's a new preacher. Some people come out of curiosity. We'll pick up a member here or there. We might have a Bible study here and there, but not real substantial growth until the second year. The second year after going through this, now everybody's not going to change their thinking. I was telling Brian just last night, if you can get a handful of people, and I'm looking at you right now, this is you, okay? Just heads up. If you can get a handful of people who catch on to this and really get to work and have faith that God can do something here, you get those people working, you're going to start seeing some blessings from God. It's just that's how it works. And it has a snowball effect. Because I told Carlos, he may not realize this. Is this your wife? I shouldn't ask that question. I'm sorry. What's your name? Martha? Wanda. Wanda. I was telling Carlos, he may not realize this, but he told me they live 45 miles away. And if that's not your wife, I'm sorry I asked that. And my next question is, so does she know about your wife? That's like you never ask a woman when the baby's due, because she might not be expecting, right? So, anyway, he told me, he said, yeah, we drive about 45 miles to come to worship. And I'm like, wow. I said, you have no idea. Maybe you do. But I guarantee you there are people here that are inspired by your dedication. Guarantee you that. They are inspired and encouraged by your dedication making that drive. So that alone is having an impact on other people here. And so you get a group of people really working. You've got a plan. You're all going in the right direction. What's going to happen is those people that are on the bench, sidelined, watching, they're the ones that you ask to do stuff, and they say, well, I can't. I'm busy. I got this, that, and the other. They're going to start coming to you and saying, hey, how can I help? That's what will happen. How can I help? So things change in time, but you just got to get the ball rolling, and you got to go through this process to do that. All right, let's look at this, and then we'll take another break. Strategic planning must consider cultural changes. We live in a different age. We can't do things the same way. And I'm sorry, I am going to critique you a little bit, and help you to understand that I love this. And I know it's an old church building, but this has character. I really think it has character. And I would be disappointed if you drastically modernize this. However, some things do need to be modernized. You've got to keep up with the changes. And this is one of them. Okay. You have a new one? Good. Yeah. Yes, that's right. When we first started posting the songs on the overhead, see how old I am? The overhead, that was a little hard for me to adjust. Isn't that strange? I mean, honestly, I was like, I don't know about this. I'm used to holding a book, and I just felt it was weird for me, awkward. But now I like it. But it was a change that and change is sometimes hard to accept. But if you're going to grow, you have to change with the times. And I'm not talking about the Bible. I'm talking about methodology and the way we do things. We have to change. We're living in a different time. Anybody know what that? TV show is on the left? Father Knows Best. That's right. That's right. Now, people that are under 40 probably wouldn't know what that is. Father Knows Best. But look at the one on the right. That's what modern day families look like. It is different. We live in a different world. I really don't like to see when you go to a restaurant and there's a family out to eat and none of them's talking, all of them, including the husband and the wife, they're all on their phones. I think that's sad that that's where we are, but it's reality. That's where we are. We just live in a different time. So 70s and 80s and 90s, 68% of Americans attended worship. Today, it's less than 50%. So our country is changing. For the first time in the history of the United States, less than half of our nation goes to worship. So it has changed. It has definitely changed. Those that are claiming no religious affiliation, 68% of them are white males. That's good to know. Those are going to be your most difficult conversions, white males. You wouldn't know that, would you? I wouldn't have thought that. But that's what the stat is. So we have to look at cultural changes and understand we just have to do things different. Times They Are Changing was a song that came out in the 70s, I think. We must constantly consider new and effective means to evangelize our community. The definition of insanity, I know you've heard that. If we can't expect different results if we keep doing things the same way. But we're more comfortable doing things the same way, right? I can't tell you how many elders I've met with when I make suggestions. Okay, here's what I suggest that you do. I cannot tell you how many times I get the response. But we've what? We've always done it that way. So, I mean, how is that a valid argument? We've always done it that way. I understand that you've always done it that way. But that doesn't mean that you have to keep doing it that way. Because if you keep doing everything the same way, you're going to have the same results. If you want different results, something has to change. As hard as that is to accept, change is hard, especially for us as we get older. Change is hard. Now, these kids growing up nowadays, they're used to it because they grew up in the computer age, and that changes every day, right? I mean, who was I talking to? The waitress. When I stopped to eat, the menu had changed, and I said, hey, and she said, I don't know why. She couldn't find what I was looking for on the menu, and I said, you know what I can't stand about grocery stores that move everything. You know, you go shopping, you go down the bread aisle, and it's not there. I'm like, well, you know, and I asked an employee one time at H-E-B, I think it was, or it might have been Walmart, I can't remember. I said, well, where's such and such? Oh, they moved that to aisle 3. I said, why? Who's doing that? And he said, well, it's a marketing thing. I said, well, it's a bad marketing thing. You need to tell them, leave it alone. I mean, you know, I don't have time to run all over the place trying to find where it is. You know, change is hard. And do what? Download the app. Well, that's hard too. That's true. I know that's their thinking. They make you wander around, and it worked because I do end up doing that. But change is just difficult, and it's hard. But I'm telling you, if Abell Street's going to grow, you got to be willing to make changes and adjust as we go, and update. And you are. I hear you already doing some updates here, which is really, I think you got some fresh painting here. I understand you're going to be putting in a new floor over there. That's great. That's what we're talking about. You need to do that, and don't be afraid to make changes. Don't be afraid. Well, there's it. Don't be afraid to think out of the box. The Campbell soup story. It's on page 11. I don't know if it's in the workbook. I think it's in the workbook. But the Campbell soup story, what that is, in a nutshell, Campbell soup was losing money. We all know Campbell soup. I mean, it's been around forever, right? It's good soup. I mean, when you're sick, there's nothing better than Campbell's chicken noodle soup. But they started losing money. They weren't selling as much soup. A lot of competition out there. Well, they got a new guy, a new marketing CEO or whatever, a new guy that came in, and he made a major change with Campbell Soup. Y'all may remember this. They came out with a microwavable container that looks like, the sippy cups for coffee. They put Campbell Soup in that. And you stick it in the microwave, you heat it up, you can take it with you, and microwavable bowls. And guess what? I don't remember, you can read the story, but I think sales went up by 8% almost immediately. Did they change the soup? No. It's still the same soup. But they changed the way they presented the soup and the way they, marketed it. That's all I'm saying about wherever my Bible is. That's what I'm saying about the Word of God. Here it is. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Thank you. We cannot change this. Why do we not want to change it? I know it's the Word of God, but what's the value of keeping it where it is? There's no standard of right and wrong. And what is the power to change people? What does Romans 1 and verse 16 say? I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. Why? It's the power of God unto salvation. This is where the power is. In the message. Power's in the message. But we can't change that. We don't want to change that. But we have to change the way we present it. We have to change the way we present it because our culture is different. So we need to think of other ways, new ways to do it. I would not suggest Facebook. Don't try to change people on Facebook. You get into these, and people get into these conversations on Facebook, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I don't get involved in it. I just stay away from that. But there are lots of ways that we can share the gospel that's different than the way we've always done it. We just have to be willing to make changes and in the way we present it. So, okay, let's take another break. We'll take a 10-minute break, and then we'll continue, and then we're going to have lunch at 12. Is that right? Okay, so let's take about 10 minutes and take a break, and then we'll resume. And then we'll get to more specifics on planning. lunch. Um, and anytime you have a question or comment, just holler at me and stop me. If I don't see you, wave your hands around, and I'll get to you. Strategic planning. When we're planning a plan of work for the church, it's really important to leave room for God. Here's typically how we approach planning for the church. Well, okay, here's our budget. We have this much money, so this is what we can do. Well, there's no room for God in that kind of planning. We have to leave room for God to do some things. Step out above what you see and what you think you're able to do. Set some big goals. Have some bigger dreams. Consider the community. I was asking Brian last night about the demographics of Wharton, and y'all can help me if this is right, but slightly more black people than white people, not a whole lot of difference. Is that right? Does that sound about right? And what's the difference in the school? The school is predominantly black. And then what about the Hispanic population? Okay. So there's a pretty good mix of black, white, and Hispanic. Mm-hmm. So that's something to, yeah. Well, that's not a bad thing, actually. It can be a barrier in growing the church. When I was the church in Killen, Alabama, recruited me and my wife to move to Mississippi to reestablish a congregation there, and it was predominantly a black community. And there was a whole bunch of challenges with that work, but the first person I baptized was a black lady. And what was different in Mississippi, like in at least where I'm from, Fort Worth, Dallas area, you have literally black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods. In Mississippi, it wasn't that way. I mean, it was not uncommon for a black person and a white person to live right next door to each other, but they didn't worship together. They didn't worship. They lived right next to each other, but they didn't worship together. So I baptized this lady. She's a black lady, and she didn't come to worship. I said, well, what is the problem? She said, I love y'all, but you're all white. I said, well, yeah. And I said, and you're all black. So what does that matter? She said, well, I just don't feel comfortable. And so I directed her to a black congregation in a different town. And I don't know that it worked out, but that is something to think about in your planning. You need to look at your community, consider the demographics is one thing. And the way that church I said had 2 people when we started. Now they've got about 75 or 80, but they have a black preacher now too. And so what I did in Mississippi is when we had a gospel meeting, I invited a black preacher to conduct the gospel meeting for us. He did a great job. Brought his own amen section. The brethren over here, amen, yeah. And sometimes I would invite a black song leader to come lead singing for us and things like that. So it enabled us to start reaching the black community as well. And so we had 2 men named Robert. Now, my son Caleb's a preacher now, but he was just a little bitty thing then. He was 3 or 4 years old. And we had a new member, a man I baptized named Robert. He was ex-military. I don't remember now what branch of service, but just a high-class guy, really good man. And then we had another man named Robert, and Caleb called one of them Robert and the other one Black Robert. He said, Black Robert? And I said, I'm sorry, but he said, hey, I don't care. It's not an insult. I know what color I am. He's like, I'm fine with that. So, we got along fine. And but that's something for you to consider in your planning and how to grow the church. You need to make sure that the Black community realizes, hey, we're welcome there. And you may have to do some things to help encourage that along the way. But so, yeah, look at the demographics, their struggles, their needs. Just get to know the community. What are people out there looking for? What do they need? What help do they need? How can I connect with these people in the community? Now, from what I understand, and I know very little about this, but it sounds like there's quite a few that drive. Not everybody lives right here, right? So you've got a lot of people that are not from this immediate community, which is not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. But you really need to focus on seeing if you can get some people from the local community. And so the better you get to know them and the better connections you can make. And I think was it Carlos that said that get engaged in the activities in the community? Yeah, that really is important in order to start reaching these local folks. And we'll talk about ways to do that in just a minute. But that'll help you design your ministries for that. Well, I put example Tylertown. There it is. That's what I was just talking about. We got a black song leader and all that. Developing a vision. A dream without faith is fantasy. So what kind of church do we want to be? And it takes a team effort. So we're making plans. We're going to plan our activities for 2026. So what we need to decide is, okay, where are we headed? What kind of church do we want to be? And I said it's a team effort. One of the things that I'm going to emphasize is when you start putting together a plan of work, it would really be good if Brian could maybe get a few people, maybe at least one elder, and a couple of three other key people to talk and make a plan. And then present that to the elders, say, here's what we're thinking, get the elders' input on it, and then formulate a plan. Here's the direction where we want to go. And the survey that we did is going to help you. Here's some things we need to do to get things better. Here's the direction we want to go. So what I want us to do this morning with the time we have left is I want us to paint a picture of Abell Street Church of Christ 2 years from now. Okay? So what I'd like to do is I want you to share with me, and you see there, look beyond small numbers, financial difficulties, and possibilities. So I don't want you to think, well, I'd like to see us do this, but that would be too much money. We don't have the money. Don't think that way, because that's showing a lack of faith. I think it'd be great if we could do this, but we don't have. Yeah, I'd like it, but we don't have, or we can't. Get that out of your head. Don't use those words. We can't, or I can't, or we can't. You need to quit thinking that way. There's a guy at our congregation. I love him. He is a good man. He is one of the greatest servants in our congregation. If you need anything, you call on this guy. He and his wife both. They'll be there. But the one flaw this brother had, every time we suggest, why don't we do such and such? He says, well, we tried that before, and it didn't go so good. We did this, and nobody came. There was a cartoon, I can't remember now what it was, but there was one character, he's always saying, we'll never make it. That's who he reminds me of. It's just negative. And you got to get that thinking out of your head. Because from my perspective, that's a lack of faith in God. Because God is the one doing this, not you. He just chooses to work through us. He works through us. And so if we're always saying we can't, really that's a slap in the face of God. Because He's the one doing it. We are just the vessel through whom He works. For example, did you know, maybe you do know this, did you know there's not one example in the Bible of God telling a person how to be saved? Think about that. Can you think of one? When Saul was on the road to Damascus, he asked God, what shall I do, Lord? Did God say, well, you need to repent and be baptized? He didn't say that, did he? What did he tell him? You remember what he told Saul? You go into the city. Yeah, you're right, it's Ananias. You go into the city, and it will be told you what you must do. Why didn't God just tell him? God doesn't work that way. You're right. He used Ananias to tell him. Why? I don't know. That's just how God works. So you need to understand, when we say we can't, that's a slap in the face of God. That is a lack of faith. So forget about money, forget about space, forget about your abilities and all of that, and let's think, where do we want to see Abell Street? I can pick any one of these colors I want. Okay. I pick white. When my wife married me, she had a niece that said, "Rhonda, you really have to help your husband dress like something other than a funeral director." I you know, when before I got married, I knew how to dress myself. I thought I did, and after I got married, I realized I had no idea. I've been walking around, people laughing at the way I dress, I guess. But so she got me. At least I got a little bit of color in this shirt. But but anyway, so I pick white. That's just how I am. So okay, so tell me, would you like to see Abell Street? What would you like to see it look like? And let me help you a little bit. I would like that we had better such and such, or I would like that we had more of this, or I would like that we did more of that, or we had more of these people, or you see where I'm going? So somebody tell me, what's something 2 years from now, what would you like to see be a characteristic of this church? More young families? Okay. Way to go, Steve. He jumped right out there. More young family. Okay. Somebody else? Okay. More numbers. So let's put a number to that. So when you have 100, you'd like to see 100? How many would you like to see, Beverly? 176. All right. That's great. Okay. What else would we like to see 2 years from now? Ah, okay. Yeah. Wednesday and Sunday attendance. Okay. What else? So, how more visibility? Okay. Yeah, there you go. I knew what you were saying. I wasn't sure how to put that. Okay. What else? What's that? More baptisms? Yeah. New Christians. New Christians. Brian? Okay. So, 8 personal workers. Y'all help me remember what that stands for. 8 personal workers. Okay. What else? Okay. Multicultural. Do what? No, yeah, I'll make another column. Um, Multicultural, that's good. What else? Okay. So more teachers? Okay. Sue, I'm going to start another column. More men involved in the worship service. All right. I know what you mean. More men in worship leadership roles in worship service. What else? More elders? Yeah, 4 elders. You want 4 elders. That's a good goal. What else? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, right. So, how would you word that? Nursing home ministry, shut-in ministry. Okay, yeah. Let's do shut-ins because it's more than just nursing home. And I know, what was the brother's name? Mario said that he was doing some of that, I think, or someone said they were. So that's good though, Jay. What's something else you'd like to see in 2 years from now? Youth group, a larger youth group. Yeah, that's good. Every church wants a large youth group. Brian, youth minister. We'll put it that way, minister or deacon. What else? Okay. Um, ladies ministry. Because you already have some things for the ladies, I understand, right? What else? What was something that came out this morning about that? The men. So that's kind of what Steve was alluding to here, but I'm going to put this is a little broader men's ministry also. So, okay, what else? Let's talk about characteristics. What kind of church do you want to be? Healthy, loving. You know, I want to tell you a story about that. I like that healthy because there's a lot there. Because I'm gonna write that down. Um, oh, did I? What'd she say? Happy. Oh, well, healthy, happy. Okay, happy. I did happy. I thought you said healthy. Happy is part of being healthy, right? Loving. Yeah. Let me tell you what happened. Well, first of all, do you do y'all consider you to be a friendly congregation? Do you know that every church thinks they're a friendly congregation? Even the ones full of grump, they think they're a friendly congregation. Isn't that funny? I mean, they do. Um, and I'm not saying you're not, but every church thinks that. I literally, Rhonda and I, when we moved back to Texas from Mississippi, was looking for, no, this is I think this before we went to Mississippi. I was thinking, looking for a preaching position, and a church in Waco, Texas, was hiring a preacher. So Rhonda and I said, I think this before we even got married. I said, before I send in a resume or anything like that, let's just go visit. I just want to see. They don't know who we are. Let's see what we see when we get there. This is a congregation of about 125 people. And we walk in and we sit down, and everybody in that auditorium went, that's it. But they stared at us. They're like, who is that? And nobody spoke to us. Worship service was over. Nobody said hello. And I saw one of the elders. I knew he was an elder because I'd looked at the website and I knew who the elders were. So I saw one of the elders. They're looking for a preacher too. And I purposefully, on the way out, I bumped him. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. He said, no problem. I thought, okay. My thought was, man, they need help. Yeah, I think I'll take this preaching job. They need it bad. They need help bad. But we ended up going somewhere else. But I thought, man, they have no idea that's how you treat visitors. We felt like we were violating their space. We really did. And did you know that I have gone to places? I mean, I travel a lot. I speak at a lot of congregations, and sometimes people don't even know why I'm there or who I am or anything. And I'll go and sit down, and this is no joke. I've had people say to me, "Excuse me, sir, that's my spot." Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that Afghan there. I should have known, you know. And so I get up. I had a friend of mine, a truck driver. He got moved 3 times visiting the church. He's traveling. Somebody said that's where we sat. And another family, so he moved. Another family came in with about 5 or 6 people and said, "This is our pew. Our family takes up the whole pew. This is our pew." Oh, I'm sorry. He said after the 3rd time, he just stood in the back of the auditorium waiting for everybody to sit down, and then he took a seat. So, but they think they're a friendly church. See, so. But anyway, yes, sir.
And there was a pretty well-known preacher I lived here.
Wow, isn't that something? Well, I tell you, that's where you make it or break it with visitors when they walk in that door. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, it's hard to get people to come through that door, and if they come voluntarily and you don't take advantage of that, wow, you're missing out. So what I'm going to do now, after lunch, I'm going to start giving you some real specific things to do, okay? I'm going to share with you some ministry ideas, some organizational things, some different specific things. We've been talking generalities all this time, but the last 3 hours, we're really going to look at nuts and bolts, okay? But what I'm trying to do here, all of these things can happen. All of this can happen. Matter of fact, somebody take a picture of that. Because okay, local outreach ministry, okay. Yeah, and what I'm going to teach you in the second half today, I appreciate Steve saying that, because what I'm going to teach you today is the point I'm going to make is that this right here, that's what this is. You see, this is your outreach ministry. And what we're going to look at this afternoon, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but the idea is that everything that you do is to be evangelistically focused. So you don't have, I am getting way ahead of myself here, but you don't have an education program, a youth ministry, visitation program, benevolence program, and an outreach program. No. They're all outreach. You see my point? They're all outreach. So to your point, Steve, you're right. You need an outreach ministry, but it needs to be, all of this needs to be outreach. So, and we're going to talk about that in more detail. But what I want, the reason I want to do that is for you to understand these are all admirable goals and they all can be accomplished, but you can't get them all done at one time. So when you're making your plan, you've got to pick and choose and prioritize certain ones. So, okay, in 2026, these are the ones that we want to focus on to get accomplished. And so I don't know what it's going to be, but let's just let's say it's this one: more men in worship, better attendance, is this a youth group or a youth ministry? Those kind of go together. Let's say you picked those three, or maybe you may pick four things. Now we're kind of zeroing in on what we want to accomplish in 2026. Now you're going to accomplish far more than that, but those, you have to have a plan. You have to have a focus on a goal of how we're going to accomplish it. So in putting together your plan of work for next year, you're looking at ministries, activities, works, various things that you can do that will result in these things. You see what I'm saying? It doesn't happen by accident. It has to be intentional. And so you have to do things that will result in those activities being done. And what will happen is, what you'll find, the more of these things that you can get accomplished, this will just naturally happen. That's the end result. It just naturally happens. Isn't that what Ephesians 4 said last night? Every part working together, the elders equipping the saints for the ministry causes growth. That's what this is. This is Ephesians 4 on a chalkboard. It causes growth. And so, and these things like this and this are also going to result in that. Where was that when 8 personal workers? So you can't do everything, but at the same time you're kind of doing a little bit of everything. But you've got to focus in on certain things. So what we're going to look at, especially this afternoon, I'm going to sit down with Brian. We're going to talk a little bit, and I want to get his ideas of what he wants to do and the direction that he has in mind. And we're going to work together to put together a plan that he will then present to the elders, and you guys can talk about it and look at it, and maybe bring in some more people to be a part of that. It's really important to have other people involved in that planning process. But you're only going to have 3 or 4 major events in 2026. There'll be 3 or 4 major events to help accomplish the things that you want to get done. Okay? Because you can't have a big event every month. You get burned out. If you do it right, you'll burn out. Because I'm not talking about getting up here Sunday morning, say next week we're having a gospel meeting. Hope y'all can be here. No. That's not how you do it. You've got to promote, organize, really work to get that thing to be good and to get people in here. It takes time. It takes work. Jay was telling me about the camp. Was it Medina? No, Bandina. And they said it was like a vacation. And after it was over, you said, I need a vacation for that. And that's what Vacation Bible School is. You ever done Vacation Bible School? It's great, but aren't you exhausted when it's over? I mean, man, it wears you out. And I always tell people the best part about going on vacation is coming home. I'm just glad to be in my own bed. I had a great time. Smoky Mountains are beautiful, but man, being back in my bed is nice. So you get burned out if you try to do too much. So, but let me just share with you this next screen, and then we'll be ready to take a lunch break here. But I said dream big. That's why I like this. I like this. Dream big. And I know you're already close to 80 here, something like that. But I'm telling you, some of these churches I've worked with doubled in size the second year. Now, next year's not your second year. Next year's really your first year. So I don't anticipate, that's why I said 2-year plan. So this would probably be 2027. I anticipate, depending on how many of you jump on board. But if several of you will jump on board and do the work, then I anticipate you're going to see an explosion of growth in 2027. Because you got to go through those 6 stages first. And not for all of you here, I understand that. You know, most of you, maybe all of you here, already have a healthy respect for the Word of God. But I'm talking about this is a whole congregation thing, not just you. The whole church needs to be involved. And so you got to bring them along. But the church in the first part of the book, I tell about, I don't think I mentioned that it's Burns, Tennessee. It's just, I say a little church in Dixon County, Tennessee. 60 people is what they had. And I was a student at David Lipscomb. I was in graduate school at David Lipscomb. Not proud of that, by the way. That school's gone really crazy. But Freed Hardeman did not have a graduate program at the time. And so Brother Flatt was the academic dean. He said, go to Lipscomb. They have a master's degree. So I did. So I was a student at David Lipscomb. And I also had a job working for a company that rented life support systems to hospitals. I didn't know they did that, by the way, but hospitals don't actually own those life support systems. They rent them. And so that's what this company did. And it was a member of the church that owned the company. So I was working full-time for him. And I was a full-time student in the graduate program working on my master's degree. And I was preaching for this little church in Burns, Tennessee. The only time they saw me was Sundays and Wednesdays. That's it. I didn't have an office there, nothing like that. And I told the 2 ladies in the back row, they always came early, and it was a mother and daughter. And I said, you know, God can grow this church. They said, nope. I've been here all my life, the daughter said. She was in her 40s. She said, this church has always had 60 people. It always will have 60 people. And I thought, we got some work to do here. Got to get her mind changed. And I hope that's not how everybody thinks, but it kind of was. And I just simply said, well, you never know what God can do. Well, God changed that church. He changed that church. And the second year, we went from 60 to 120. 1 year's time. Not, the first year we didn't grow much. That second year we went from 60-something to 120-something. And that's the church where we were baptizing. The last month I was there, we were baptizing a person on average every 3 days. It was blowing up in growth. And so the second year, and I'm not saying that's going to happen here. God's the one that does it. But it does depend greatly on what you do, because he works through you. But this is not unrealistic, is what I'm trying to say. This is not unrealistic. I mean, honestly, you're not that far away from 100. You're really not. If you double next in 2027, you're going to be closer to that. And so, so believe it and pray about it, and have faith that God can do that. So here's some of the things that are typically given whenever I do this. I just shared some of the thoughts that some people have. We want more visitors. We want to be a church that's welcoming to visitors. We want to be more evangelistic, more caring, more of a family. Want more unity as a congregation. Sound in the faith, active, 100% involvement. Man, that is so important. 100% involvement. We're going to talk about that after lunch. How do you get there where you've got everybody working? And that was something you scored kind of low on the survey. Has everybody got a job? Well, no. Well, no church has that. But that's where we want to go. It's where we want to get. We want to be growing, double in size in 5 years, which is quite doable. More young people, better singing, involved in the community, a better giving, increased in Bible knowledge, mission-minded, elders and deacons, and a new church plant. I added that one. But some of those were things that you guys came up with this morning. So some overlap there. But you see, there's some other thoughts that have come up in these things. And so this is kind of how you start the planning process. You decide, okay, what do we need to do? Where do we need to go? And this little survey is helpful in learning, okay, here's some areas we need to focus on to get better, but here's some goals that we want to accomplish. And so we will develop a plan with the goals that we have, and it doesn't necessarily going to be limited to this. You know, we'll talk and say what you may want to do in the future, but we'll put together a plan to where we can accomplish those things. So it kind of starts with a vision, if you will, just a vision. And then you make plans to accomplish those goals. And so it gives you direction and helps you to see where you're going to go. Okay, we'll stop right there because that's the vision statement thing. But I get so excited about this. I told, what was the gentleman's, was it Carlton? I told Carlton, he said he couldn't stay, and he told me that when he came this morning. He said, I'm sorry I wasn't here last night, but I can't stay, but I'm looking at the material, and he said, I'm really liking what I hear. And I said, well, I'm glad you came. And he said, thank you for coming. And I said, you know, my grandfather told me this years ago. He said, David, you find something you love to do and make it your job, you never go to work a day in your life. Well, that's how I feel. It's not work for me. I love doing this. And you know why I love it? The reason I love doing these seminars is because I know the potential that's there. I don't think it. I know that God can do great things at this church. My frustration is getting you to know that. You know, that's the challenge. And you're going to come along much quicker than the rest of these people. They don't even believe it. It's going to take a while to get them there. But I love it. And so I told Carlton, I said, you know, Carlton, I'm glad to be here, and I just appreciate the vision that the leaders here have, their desire to grow. I mean, that's where it starts. Kind of like, I know that's not a qualification of an elder necessarily. I guess that's a matter of opinion. But you know how is it 1 Peter 3? If any man desire the office of a bishop, I think that's pretty key. You got to desire it. And so if you desire to grow, that's kind of the first step too. So I told him, I just can't wait to see what God's going to do. I can't wait to see what God is going to do at Abell Street. When you start getting it together and everybody working and you got some goals and you got a plan, here's how we're going to get there, and watch what God does. And you know what's beautiful about all this? Your plan's not going to be perfect. It's going to be, it's not going to be a perfect plan. Well, that's okay. You're going to have some missteps along the way. That's okay. Were the children of Israel perfect? Have you read the Old Testament? Man, they were terrible. They were terrible. I mean, all the adultery and murder and lying and that went on, and yet God still accomplished his will through those people. So I'm not saying you're a bunch of liars here. I'm just saying that don't worry about your plan's not going to be perfect. Don't worry about that. Just make sure it's in line with God's will, and see what God's going to do. I love this about our God. He can take our feeble, and I mean that, feeble effort and do something really big with it. The key is we got to put forth a feeble effort. Put forth an effort and let God work and see what he will do. And when he does something, man, celebrate it. Celebrate it. So, okay, any comments or questions or anything you want to add to that? Or you good? Do you see where I'm going with this? Okay. And so after lunch, we're going to get really more down to brass tacks, so to speak. I'm going to give you some real detailed ministry ideas and what works and how to run it and how to do it and the results that you can expect to see from that. And I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you. That's why the book is valuable. You can go back and read the book and get those details again. But I'm excited. I'm excited about you have a lot to work with. You have a lot going for you already here. So I think you're going to see some great results. So anyway, okay. Do you want to? Y'all want to have a prayer now? We can have a prayer before Temple. Would you lead us in a word and offer thanks for the food for us?